Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Hello and welcome to Marketing Management, a VUCA perspective. We are discussing core concepts, and I am your friend and tour guide on this amazing and fantastic journey, Siddhi Bhattacharyya. Now, we've been discussing pricing, the psychology behind it, and how it impacts consumer responses. Now, having understood the details of pricing, how to go about it, the various frameworks that are used by marketers, let's look at certain case study examples which are very prevalent for what has happened within the Indian construct. So, with that, today's case studies cover the rideshare business as such, and we'll cover about 3 odd brands which have been fighting it out. They've been duking it out with their particular offerings. We'll understand how their businesses work and how they have actually played it out in the consumer's mind. What the challenges for these particular organizations have been, the category as such, and consumer responses thrown in for good measure. So, first and foremost, the homegrown Ola. Now, Ola revolutionized India's transportation landscape, and it was founded in 2010 by Bhavish Agarwal and Ankit Bhati. Now, Ola transformed India's fragmented transportation sector into something which was hitherto unforeseen. So, it was an organized, technology-driven ecosystem which Indians were completely new to, but yet they lapped it up. It started as a small cab aggregator. Ola expanded to become one of India's largest ride-hailing services, and they addressed critical inefficiencies in urban mobility. At that point in time, ride sharing was absolutely a novel concept for India. And on top of it, the other bigger challenges that were there were that there was various forms of congestion. The public transportation system was not entirely reliable. It was definitely overcrowded and under systemic pressure from India's massive population, and especially so in the case of the urban centers. So, this presentation explores all the journeys starting with Ola's, and it actually talks about these transportation challenges that it tackled and the innovative solutions that it implemented to go ahead and actually manage the scenario. What its impact was on India's mobility landscape is also looked at in this particular conversation. We'll also look at Uber and Rapido within the particular framework. So, we'll be able to understand the evolving ride-sharing market in India far better as we go along. So, Ola's founding vision, Ola, founded in 2010 by Bhavish Agarwal and Ankit Bhati, was established to address that particular transportation inefficiency which we talked about, and they had obviously a lot many other features. There were other smaller but niggling problems like except for Bombay, in other places there was a lot of ride rejection, and in fact there was always a haggling which was there when it came to meter based rides, especially in other metros. Delhi NCR was very infamous because of this, and that was a big challenge on a day-to-day basis. This also had a huge population waiting for such a service because the crowded urban areas provided that particular inflow of consumers very readily. So, they had a nice evolution journey. They started from being small cab aggregators and became one of India's largest ride hailing services and expanded across diverse geographies. Their core mission very clearly was to provide affordable, accessible and reliable transportation while scaling quickly to become one of India's largest ride hailing services across the country. They wanted to capture the urban landscape first and foremost, and then as things went further, they would expand into tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 towns and such like. So, that was the general direction which Ola took. Now, there were very clear transportation challenges which helped Ola cement their station in that particular market very clearly. The first and foremost at the basal level was safety concerns. There was no tracking, there was no accountability. Women found it unsafe to travel in cabs, and in fact, at that point in time, there were lots of incidents which were reported about how unsafe travel for women was in in India, especially in ride sharing or ride hailing services. Again, the lack of infrastructure was another big problem. So, it automatically led to the availability challenge. Services were unreliable, and during peak hours, people would wait and just wait, but they would not get that particular service when they needed it most. Again, there were pricing issues because fares were inconsistent. There was a lot of exploitation and rigging also. In fact, even inside of Bombay, which had the best metered system of uh, public transport through autos and rickshaws and through cabs, even there some amount of rigging was happening from time to time, and it was making it unregulated and very, very challenging for consumers. Beyond this, there was the unorganized sector, which was an extremely fragmented market, and thousands of independent operators who were very, very barter based, who operated at their own whim, and there was no consistency or service level agreement which they had to cater to. So, at times they would do a disappearing act on consumers, at times they would overcharge them, at times there would be scuffles and mistreatment happening. So, a lot of challenges were there because there was no strategic alignment of what was to be expected from that particular sector, and that was lacking and ailing the entire sector, and also the consumers were feeling the heat because of that. Now, the problem of unregulated fares was something which actually inspired the founders to think of this. There was initially very arbitrary pricing. Local taxi operators often exploited customers by changing their rates very, very arbitrarily. They also had unions, so they were very well organized, and consumers really had no voice against this. And especially during peak hours or in areas with limited transportation options, they would actually turn around and say things at their own whim and fancy, and consumers, because they didn't have any other viable option to go to, they would be forced to be exploited by what was available. Tourists coming to India were also facing this situation and scenario, and they were exploited even further because they were not locals. They did not have the language capability with them, and so therefore it was easier for the locals to exploit them even further. Travelers in tourist destinations had no way of knowing what the fare prices would be for that particular transit, and were often quoted astronomical exorbitant rates and created a complete negative experience about the entire ordeal. And this was not just in one or two limited places, it was a widespread nationwide issue. A 2010 survey showed that 70% of commuters in Indian metros like Delhi, Mumbai, Bangalore, they all reported being overcharged by local taxi services. So, this was not a one city phenomenon. This was across the board, and everybody was feeling the heat from this. So, consumers really wanted something that would solve their problem and give them an outlet. Now, in terms of service availability and the consistency, again there was a huge challenge here. 60% of the commuters were affected because of this, and they actually ran up something like 30 plus minutes of waiting time because of the lack of available services. And this automatically resulted in all the pit stop points, they had more than 3 times the regular crowd would actually assemble there, because everybody was vying to get onto one of the other services which were available. So, nearly 60% of these daily commuters had to wait more than 30 minutes, and public transportation, since it was very weak, it gave options like buses and trains, and these were severely overcrowded during peak hours. So, people had been facing the brunt of this throughout. Now, in this fragmented and disorganized market, there were other challenges. You could not book something because people relied on regular phone calls, and they had to have people's numbers who they knew, who they could actually talk to. Earlier services like Meru, etc., had physical stands, and these were very limited. So, it would be only at nodal points like the airport or the railway station. You had a prepaid taxi booth again at railway stations and airports, and otherwise you had to completely be at the mercy of just raising your hand and hailing a cab down in the street. So these were the challenges people were running with. On the other side, drivers themselves were also facing a lot of challenges because they could not get consistent customers. They were sitting, they were wasting their time running around city blocks, expending fuel and not getting a ride at times. So that was another challenge from the driver side of things. The idle time for drivers was significantly higher, and therefore there was underutilization of both vehicles and the driver's time. And there was no central platform which actually gave it a proper aggregation. So therefore, no organized system was there connecting the passengers to the operators, the huge gap which was therefore filled by Ola. Safety and trust concerns, especially we've talked about this for women. There was no centralized tracking of how, where people were, the rides would not be tracked, and there was a lot of malicious incidents which happened at that point in time. Passengers, especially women, felt unsafe commuting, and especially during late hours. And city life unfortunately pushes extra work hours or creates longer work days for people, and that is where the challenges increase and they get compounded, because without any way to track their journey, these rides could be at the mercy of the individual who was providing the service. Now, women's safety issues were therefore predominantly there. Lot of incidents happened in India during that particular time period, and those actually brought the issue clearly to the fore. Women were particularly apprehensive about traveling alone at night due to numerous reports of crimes and harassment against them. And yes, finally, payment disputes. So there was no secure payment systems. Digital transactions hadn't happened. People would ask for arbitrary sums of money. People would not return loose change. And all of these transactions were causing lots of trouble for people, and it added to the fare disputes and added stress for passengers who were just trying to get from point A to point B. So the customer experience challenges were with also vehicle quality, because the vehicle at times wasn't clean, it did not meet maintenance standards, the AC didn't work, it was too sweaty inside, the windows wouldn't work, the doors were jammed, the seats were dirty, the person driving wasn't well groomed. A lot of problems with them. Drivers used to have very, very tepid behavior at times. They were unpredictable and they had no standardized accountability system, so they could do whatever they pleased. And payment issues, like we discussed, that it was only cash. So therefore, you had to have a ton of cash on you to be able to fund your travel from place to place. This was leading to change shortages and fare disputes going along. Now, Ola's comprehensive solution approach was to give you a user-centric mobile app, because mobiles were at that point in time connected to the internet. The consumer was typically using the mobile as the first point of interacting with the internet. So that was very clearly available as a device for users to get on board. Beyond this, they developed an intuitive app and featured certain things like a tailored way to address core pain points of Indian commuters. So it gave automatically a doorway to taxi and cab and rickshaw owners to also join in. So there was instant fleet expansion and diversification. You could actually get different kinds of cabs for different fare tiers. Independent operators also pulled in and introduced various vehicle options from mini to premium. So that range also was available depending on what kind of luxury you wanted to travel in or what kind of group size was traveling at one point in time. Both things were addressed, and the pricing was done innovatively and technology was used to the hilt. Hence, it gave dynamic pricing, surge pricing and a variety of other things, and advanced algorithms were used to optimize the operations for the rideshare. Again, safety features were built in. You had SOSs and alert systems both inside the car physically as well as on the mobile device, and that helped build a lot of trust for the brand and the services being offered. These SOS buttons, live tracking and driver verification was used to address the safety concerns which people had. Very clearly, the mobile app was user centric, and because it was user centric, launched in December 2010, Ola's mobile app addressed core pain points with features like instant booking, real-time GPS tracking, fare estimation before you actually made your travel plan, and multiple payment options including cash. So cash was also part of it but you could also make online transactions or net banking or card based transactions that point in time as well. Now, this transparent pricing made it very honest and made it very open. So, it was very easy for the consumer to estimate their travel cost as well. And it solved the long standing issue of arbitrary fare demands that had plagued the traditional taxi system in India. Nowadays, you even have QR based UPI payments. So, that has made it even better for the consumer to pick it up. Now, with the fleet expansion and diversification, you could get an Ola Mini, which was the entry level item, and you could go up to Ola Prime, which was the more exuberant option, and you could also thereafter, when launched, you could get into an Ola Auto. So, the range of offerings was also there within the larger brand. You could get the hatchbacks for budget conscious customers, and you get premium sedans, even the MUVs for those seeking comfort and style for business travelers and seeking luxury experiences or having a bigger packs size of travelers. And Auto was there as the cost effective version where auto rickshaws integrated onto the platform and provided the most affordable last mile connectivity options. Much later, bikes also came by. Ola then decided that this was not enough and it wanted to diversify into other vehicles. They expanded beyond cabs alone by getting into other market segments and price points. Ola by 2019 had added electric vehicles under the Ola Electric initiative and was addressing the growing demand for sustainable transportation, which is part of what India is all about right now. They are jumping or rather leapfrogging the entire sustainability bandwagon, and the company provided drivers with benefits such as low interest vehicle loans, fuel discounts and flexible earning models, and this incentivized them to join the platform and ensure there was consistent vehicle availability. So, the supply part is what they worked on, and the marketing of it actually took care of the demand part from consumers. They got the auto rickshaws and the bikes, which was a game changer. This allowed Ola to tap into segments where affordability was really a challenge, and it gave them the chance to enter more market segments and address the last mile connectivity challenge, especially in congested urban areas, because beyond just the availability of an affordable version, the zip zapping across crowded areas was equally important, and bikes and auto rickshaws provided that little fillip for the brand to go ahead. In terms of our core now, pricing and technology, they did a lot of innovations. So, their algorithms helped create a dynamic pricing model, and this is something where they actually introduced the concept of surge pricing. Indians hadn't seen surge pricing prior. So, this would adjust fares based on demand and supply. It would typically go higher during peak hours, and this ensured better availability at those times, and despite occasional customer pushback, it was kept in place because customers also realized that they have to time their travel better. If they are traveling in peak times, then they will need to pay the overcharge. There were advanced algorithms which were brought in, which used machine learning and big data analytics to optimize the ride matching, reducing the wait times and improving the overall efficiency of the platform itself. Also, in order to ensure that customers paid the fair amount of that entire ride, so they optimized the using GPS technology. So, intelligent routing systems that help the drivers navigate through congested Indian cities more efficiently, saving both time for the customers and fuel for the drivers was brought into play. So, these were localized solutions for the Indian market. Ola Cabs was the lion's share owner. Then you got Ola Auto and Ola Bike. For some time, they also got Ola Share, where you could actually put up a carpool kind of scenario where more people could get on and they would get dropped off as the car moved in a certain general direction. And the latest of it was Ola Electric. So, a lot of innovation was brought about by Ola, and this looked at including segments from consumer side. Affordability was a big factor, and they tried to be inclusive for all segments. Quality was ensured, quality and security was ensured. And finally, all of these things were innovative. So it helped the transportation aspect for India as an overarching support for the very bleak, otherwise the normal commuting environment which was available in India. So they did all of these things, and finally, yes, with the Ola bike, they got sustainability also in, because electric entered the space. So they got a lot of these things going from time to time and actually showcased how innovations could be brought in into this. It also expanded regional language support to other areas and made the platform accessible to people across demographics and regions. So that was also an addition which they did. Payment flexibility was at the core. So they understood that most people still would pay by cash. They got the digital wallet going. So they introduced Ola Money, which was a repository where you could put money in escrow and use it over time to actually fund your rides. It also gave certain cashbacks and was part of a funnel into their loyalty program also, which gave them that ability. You could actually now get into multiple options because it provided credit cards, debit cards, UPI, third-party wallet integrations, and a variety of other things through which you could choose what payment choice you needed to suit the preferences and comfort levels of each individual. This was essentially beneficial and helpful to create more adoption at one hand and usage at the other hand for people. Something that helped them at this point in time was also the shift in mindset, because millennials and Gen Z typically believed that ownership of depreciating assets versus subscription. So there was a belief conversation in millennials and Gen Z, and this was a big point of contention between the two. So people at times, especially in the urban areas, believed that if you moved from the earlier thought of ownership of depreciating assets like a car towards the subscription model, it was better and more sustainable and easier on the pocket as well. So it did not have any strings attached to it, and that was always beneficial for the people involved, the consumers involved. Now, safety features and trust building were big. The live ride tracking was through GPS, and it became visible both to passengers and their emergency contacts over time. The SOS button was introduced, which was an emergency button within the app to contact safety teams or authorities immediately. The drivers came pre-verified, so background checks were happening, verification processes for all drivers were happening. You left your stuff in the cab, chances were that they would return it to you after some time because they would have found it. And there was a rating system. So the rating system was a two-way rating system, allowing both passengers and drivers to provide intuitive feedback about their rides. So it helped people get better rides and get paid better for those rides. Scalable operations and expansion was obviously the next phase. 250 plus cities across India by 2023, and they covered major metros, tier 2 and tier 3 cities in all of India. They had a very big number of 1.5 million daily rides being offered, and this was the average number of rides handled daily across the platform. And in 2 to 3 tier towns, they got 40% growth because this was completely alien there and a much big relief for the public transport infrastructure there. And it showed the successful penetration across the board for Ola's activities. Now, Ola's impact had very clear and key results. It became the market dominator, captured over 65% of India's ride-hailing market by 2023. Revenue-wise, they surged from 70 million in 2016 to 500 million by 2022. Customer satisfaction-wise, they saw 30% increase in satisfaction with under 10% of churn. And in terms of driver empowerment, they found that they onboarded 1.5 million drivers with 30 to 40% higher income, keeping them happy and on board as well. Then came Uber. Uber had already developed this internationally, and they were the global competitor coming to India and fighting it out because India provided a huge market and Ola had already proved that the market was viable. So Uber came in 2008. Travis Kalanick and Garrett Camp had conceived the idea after struggling to find a taxi on a snowy day. By 2010, Uber Cab launched as a private luxury car service in San Francisco for executives. 2011, they dropped cab from its name and raised 11 million from benchmark and expanded to New York City and Paris. By 2012, they had introduced Uber X, allowing drivers to use their personal vehicles at lower prices, and that was their evolution story internationally speaking. Now, Uber came to India and offered certain few key features which gave very big prominence to user experience. Now, the key to Uber's success is its ease of use. The app is definitely far more intuitive and easier to use. Riders simply download the app, create an account and enter payment information and they are good to go. Now, the app displays available drivers nearby, allows users to summon one with a button press, and customers can track driver location from where they are, how far they moved, have they moved or not, and they can view who the driver is, their information, check what quality ratings they have received in the past. Both riders and drivers can refuse matches with low ratings, creating the accountability in the system. In terms of their business model, Uber retains 25% of each fare plus a booking fee that covers the regulatory, safety and operational costs for the central rideshare provider. Prices are determined again by time and distance, so there is a certain amount of surge pricing here as well. So, since we were very hot on the topic of pricing, you can see surge pricing becoming very important because high demand periods exist, and that is why surge pricing takes precedence there. By 2019, Uber operated in 700 metropolitan areas worldwide with more than 100 million users, and they generated about 11 billion in revenue by 2018. The company expanded beyond rides to deliver food with Uber Eats, something which was also launched in India. Now, Uber had challenges in the global markets as well. A lot of regulatory hurdles were there because each market had a different kind of government, a different set of policies. So, many officials questioned the legality of Uber's ride service and whether it should be subject to the same laws as traditional taxi services. There were partial or complete bans in countries like France, Italy, Finland, Australia, Bulgaria. In India also, certain cities had created a lot of resistance for rideshare, especially Delhi NCR, because of the kind of protest from the unions of cab and auto drivers, which is what next happened. Taxi industry opposition protested against Uber lower prices and less stringent requirements, arguing that the medallion system which was there, the Billa number which was given out to taxis, especially in India, created an unfair playing field when competing with Uber's more relaxed driver qualifications. Now, there was a surge pricing backlash also which came from consumers because the surge pricing model faced customer dissatisfaction and some rides costing up to 7 times normal rate. Now, this was more of an algorithm glitch. So, whosoever had programmed it had not actually looked at real life situations and had actually created 7 times normal rates. The algorithm actually put that kind of number during high demand periods, leading to social media complaints about $400 single rides during weather emergencies. This is precisely what has happened. Personally also in Bombay, I have faced a couple of instances when I was traveling from my home to my office and the entire day was extremely rainy. So, I paid about 4 times the cost both ways. So, this is something which was a teething pain because the algorithm wasn't up to scratch, and this has caused a lot of grievance for everybody at that point in time. And because weather emergencies were there, it was also seen as a capitalistic company fleecing consumers in a time of duress. So that also left a lot of bad PR for the brand itself. Now, Rapido enters here and it became India's bike taxi innovation. This was later obviously copied by the other bigger players, but in 2015 this concept was thought through by Rapido, which established itself in Bengaluru as an online bike taxi service to solve last mile connectivity issues in India's congested urban areas. Why Rapido was brought into bike taxis, the first thing was Bangalore, if you have gone there, is when you will be able to understand what the true problems at the local level are. There is streamlined traffic, but it is extremely highly congested. Bangalore has roads in a lattice form. They are crossroads and they are lanes. So, because of the mesh structure, a lot of traffic jams happen at intersections and a lot of cars get piled up one behind the other. And that leads to very congested traffic flow and at times long 3-hour, 4-hour jams on busy roads and intersections. Now, bikes are able to zip past these because of their smaller width, and riders, especially single person riders, want to exercise that particular benefit from a bike ride, and that is how Rapido found a lot of room, especially in Bangalore. Now, rapid expansion therefore happened and it moved in more than 90 cities across India by 2019 with over 15,000 registered riders and approximately 30,000 daily rides happening. So, this is how Rapido took the same idea, and the problem is not that it's just in Bangalore. Bangalore was a classic example, but the same situation or thereabouts was also available in other cities to be seen. And then there was obviously the affordability bit as well. Job creation was another big benefit which Rapido brought out, because it created more than 5 lakh jobs in India by 2019, with 85% of services coming from repeat customers and 10% of riders being women as well, because it then started becoming a space for gender diversification and equality as well. Now, the huge market need for bike taxis was definitely there. And as cities recovered from COVID-19, there was an urgent need for affordable, rational, safe commute options. A 10-kilometer distance typically required more than an hour to complete in congested cities like Bangalore, like we were discussing, and on-demand taxis and auto rickshaws made the daily commutes affordable, and four-wheeler rides remained time-consuming due to the traffic congestion and also the cost which they raked up. So, you would see that was the actual growing need, and buses were typically the main blockers which would actually block traffic up, and car taxis were few and far between, also costlier, so these were another no-no. Bike taxis when launched, and prior to them the auto rickshaws, these had actually been able to tap this particular gap and they had actually got into the sweet spot for India. A lot of Indian consumers still believe in these particular abilities of rideshare, and so that is where they were as their first choice. Rapido had a unique value proposition, and that is something which also came to their aid. At the base level, they had last mile connectivity and access to areas where limited transportation was available. Second part definitely was affordability, because it was lower cost than any traditional taxi could give, and because of the small width and the single person delivery, it was speed and efficiency and the ability to navigate through congested traffic quickly, especially in the cities. And these nuances were insights that the company used for its benefit. With all these coming into their favor, they got these three going for them very clearly. There were certain challenges which were faced by Rapido. At the outset, there was customer perception, which was the first hurdle they had to stop. Many people were skeptical about bike rides because they saw them as unsafe, because in the past, personal riders and accidents that they've been into made certain people look away from bike riding as a possible taxi option. This required Rapido to launch an insurance from day zero and implement speed tracking systems on the bikes, so they would actually be able to go past because of their width, but they would not go over the speeding limit. and that was something which was beneficial again to maintain the entire trust factor. The insurance added to that. There were operational hurdles for Rapido because ensuring consistent service quality, providing protective helmets, because in cities you had dual helmets, one for the rider, one for the pillion, and maintaining their captain's behavior, because these were even lower level entry demographics compared to the auto rickshaw drivers as well, and therefore it required significant operational oversight, training and management. Regulatory barriers also came in place. In Karnataka and other states, bike taxi services faced regulatory challenges, and the government seized the vehicles, and officials noticed these people and put halts to their operations. So, these were again other challenges which happened in such areas. Now, the safety concerns were also there. Higher number of bike accidents from speeding in urban areas raised concerns about passenger safety. It also complicated the regulatory approval process, because these challenges were causing dissonance both at the consumer level and at the policy maker level as well. So, you had to fight a dual battle and win at both sides. Rapido had a lot of competitors which have also come about, like Bounce, Vogo, Bixi and On and various others in individual states, and all of these have been providing a niggling amount of competition to Rapido as things go along. Some have had better, some have had less fortune compared to them. Rapido also has been heavily dependent on funding to manage its entire journey. In April 2017, they did a pre-Series A funding backed by Hero MotoCorp, and the chairman Pawan Munjal and Google India head Rajan Anandan, they actually made the first round of investments. In 2018, they again raised $6 million across 2 rounds and achieved $1.5 million in monthly revenue. So, this was how their funding was going on in 2018. By 2019, they secured 58 million in funding from Westbridge Capital, and they had a total funding of 558 crore, which was approximately $82.2 million, and this was from various investors as they raised this over subsequent and multiple rounds. So, Rapido had a business model which was slightly different from the others. Their platform approach, although similar to Ola and Uber, provided a platform which connected riders and drivers and charged a percentage of the fare amount. The model focused on affordability. So, here surge pricing was there, but the limiting factor on it was affordability and efficiency as well, and it made it ideal for single travelers in congested cities. So, they created a very clear niche on which they focused. Brands which look to create that particular niche and work towards achieving success in it, create a certain brand equity in that space, and then they can use it in extensions elsewhere if they should choose to later on. Now, the company leverages India's massive two-wheeler market very efficiently with approximately 154 million registered bikers, which is 5 times the number of four-wheelers in the country. And this creates a sharing economy that benefits both riders as well as the drivers. For users, Rapido offers an affordable, quicker and reliable commute option, and this is perforce insurance on every ride. So, because the safety concerns were so huge, the insurance bit has actually stuck in at a mandatory and every ride level, and for riders, they call them captains. It provides an additional revenue source for bike owners who would otherwise be traveling alone. So, this gives them a certain edge over the other players in the same space. Rapido first requires you to download the app, then go ahead and register it, and once you've done that, users can actually create their account with their basic information and payment details, so that their KYC or know your customer bit is done on the app. Then they book a particular ride. So, it is very similar to the other rideshare apps available. You enter your pickup and destination points through the app interface, and then you book your entire ride, and then you wait for the rider to arrive. the captain gets assigned, and when the booking is confirmed, their name, their photo and bike number is shared with the user, very typically similar to what Uber or Ola have also done. Then you complete your journey, and finally, as usual, you end up paying. After reaching the destination, the payment is processed with a base fare of 15 rupees and rupees 3 for each additional kilometer. So, this generally ensures that the overcharging and surge pricing, etc., are a little easier for Rapido users. Now, Rapido has a very nice app interface. They have a booking screen which has a simple interface for entering pickup and drop off locations with the estimated fare and time required to travel very clearly displayed. Their captain details are shown. It displays the photo, name, bike number and rating for the safety and identification processes, and then the ride tracking happens in real time with GPS tracking of the journey, and the estimated arrival time and route is also displayed on the map in real time. So, everything happens on the go. The important thing here to understand is that while it is important to note that there is a certain ease with which the bike based ride sharing will help people. Now, they have also introduced the auto bit and the cars also for Rapido, but the important thing here being that you need to understand the interface needs to mirror the kind of audience coming on, and so therefore they have kept it easier so that people who are not going to spend too much will also not bother with too much information. They want limited precise information only which is required to work with, and that is why the design of the interface is also kept very simple and easy to use. How do they improve their user experiences? A Google Maps integration was the first thing that they did, and they partnered with Google Cloud Premier partnered and Google Maps platform partner. So, Sears was the one which they used to improve the location accuracy and navigation. This improved the performance of their app. Other than that, Roads API implementation was also put in. They used the Roads API to smooth the GPS readings from bike taxi owners' handsets and improve the tracking accuracy at the same point in time. The document submitted by all the riders was also used by implementing Vision AI to analyze their documentation such as driving licenses with high accuracy, which is crucial in a country where each state has its own license format. And then finally, accessibility features. They developed special features for visually impaired commuters with 80 to 100 visually impaired individuals using the app daily, and that is a very clear boon as well as a PR story in it for the brand as such. Now, in terms of business logistics and B2B expansion, the bike and rideshare industry is also using the same core competency to do other more integrated interactions. So, there is quick driver matching. Rapido application enables drivers to connect with customers quickly, typically within 2 to 5 minutes using Google Maps as a platform integrated with Firebase for efficient decision making. Both the ratings and where the locations are of the individuals comes into play. There is strategic acquisition. They acquired Hyderabad rival GetBike to enter the business to business segment, and GetBike chairperson Shravya Reddy relocated to Bengaluru to drive Rapido's overall B2B operations as their head. And delivery services were also entered into. They expanded into delivery services for e-commerce companies like Zomato, Myntra, Swiggy and others on increased focus during lockdown on essential goods delivery through partnerships with Big Bazaar, Big Basket and Spencer's, and they actually created that entire ecosystem for other players who did not have the ride or ride share aspect as their core competency. Now, how do you differentiate from Ola Bike and Uber Moto? What you do is you have part-time focus, targets part-time rather than full-time drivers. So, that is one very clear distinction for Rapido, and there is no vehicle financing. So, people use existing vehicles instead of financing new ones. Then there is a certain aspect of the rider welfare. So, captain welfare comes in. They provide initiatives for riders to visit cafes, restaurants for refreshments so that they can keep their sanity going while they get their work done, and there is a flexibility of captains. Riders are their own bosses with complete schedule freedom, and they can choose to switch on and switch off their ride sharing service when they choose to. So this then shows you how each of these compares when you are looking at the big ones in India. When you look at when they were founded, typically in the 2010s, both Ola and Uber were founded 2013. Uber entered India 2015. Rapido came about. In bikes only, now they have got rickshaws also, and cars and bikes, and now autos also for Uber. But Uber has had limited success with autos, and they've always had a love-hate relationship with the auto unions, etc. That has been a challenge for them to manage very clearly. Then cars, autos and bikes, which Ola had always got, that gives them a very clear edge. Market focus wise, Ola is India centric, Uber is a global player, and again Rapido is India centric. Ola has the largest base, it serves in 250 plus locations, Uber in 70 and Rapido in 90 plus. Payment options wise, everybody is pretty much on par. So, there is no real difference there. So, what therefore becomes the future of ride hailing for India? Now, the one thing which is very clearly on the anvil is electrification. You will see a lot of cars which are EVs, and this has also brought about, especially in Delhi and Mumbai, blue cars, which is another ride sharing service. They are very dependable, they are centrally run, they do not have a typical uh, franchise model where drivers come on as partners, rather they have more of a fleet from the company's side, and these are all EVs, and then you have got drivers who come in and report and get the rides done. So, Ola's push into electric vehicles with Ola Electric represents what their shift has been towards sustainable transportation, and about 20% of rides in metro cities are expected to be electric by 23. Not very clear if all of that has been achieved. There is a certain amount of AI and automation coming in. So, investment in AI and data analytics has improved the ride matching aspect yet, and it has reduced wait times by 20% and enhanced route optimization. So, therefore, you pay almost exactly what you bargained for, with the potential for autonomous vehicles in the future. If that happens, then you will have driverless cars. Now, with the recent news that is there, if Tesla manages to come inside India and the things look to be in that particular direction, then you might see some driverless car coming in, but they'll also have to improve their AI to ensure the chaos in Indian roads is something that they can manage. Beyond this, there is rural expansion, which is a huge category and territory and geography and demographic opportunity for any player who wishes to take that particular plunge. This is the next frontier for ride hailing companies in India into rural India, bringing affordable and reliable transportation to what was underserved in earlier eras, and create the economic opportunities for these places as well. So, with all of these things, we have got pricing and promotion case studies in this conversation closed for now. We will be discussing further factors as we go ahead and look into how we can take the next steps of marketing going further. So, with that, we come to a close, and I'll see you next time.
Hi, I'm Chitwan Lalji, a PhD student of Health Economics under the supervision of Dr. Debayan Pakrashi from the Department of Humanities and Social Sciences, IIT Kanpur. In one of my essays, I'm interested in understanding the relationship between consumption of fruits and vegetables and various health indicators. Health indicators, both subjective and objective health indicators like mental health, self-assessed health, various measures of blood pressure and various measures of cholesterol. Measures of blood pressure like systolic and diastolic BP, you have your incidence of high BP, MAP and incidence of high MAP. And as far as cholesterol is concerned, I have tried to concentrate more on total cholesterol, good cholesterol and incidence of high cholesterol. Now before I go on to what have been my major contributions and various policy implications, I would like to briefly tell you about the policy initiatives of WHO and various countries. The WHO, that is the World Health Organization, it started with a campaign of 5 a day. That is, you should have 5 portions of fruits and vegetables per day. That would be approximately, you could say, 400 grams of fruits and vegetables. Now, a portion, before we go further, I'll just tell you what exactly is a portion. One portion is equivalent to a medium-sized apple, or one small glass of fruit juice, which is approximately 150 milliliters, and maybe 3 teaspoons of vegetables. So, the WHO went with a 5 a day campaign, which was further taken up by various countries. Countries like UK, Netherlands, Germany, Norway, they adopted the 5 a day policy, while some went for expansionary dietary policies like France, Australia, Canada, Denmark. So, for example, Australia, it went for 2+5 policy, in which it said that you should consume 2 portions of fruits and 5 portions of vegetables per day. And USA went for a policy of fruits and vegetables more matters. That is, you must consume more and more fruits and vegetables. Now, irrespective of these expansionary dietary policies and dietary propagations, it has been found that only 28% of women and 25% of men, they actually meet the recommended dietary norms of 5 a day portion. So, the major contribution of my work is firstly to find an association between fruits and vegetables, whether there exists a relationship between fruits and vegetables and health indicators, and if they exist, whether due to heterogeneity in the data. So, I will be doing it according to age, by gender and by your weight. So, apart from that, I will go for policy recommendations, in which I am basically studying how much fruits and vegetables matter. Apart from that, which type matters more. So, for that I have taken data from the Health Survey of England. Health Survey of England is an annual survey which takes data, which conducts information regularly on demographic and socioeconomic characteristics. You have your lifestyle behaviors like an individual smokes or doesn't smoke, alcohol consumption, you have your sedentary and physical activities, and you have various health indicators also which have been collected. Before I go on to what exactly is my research, I would like to concentrate more on fruits and vegetables, like what kind of questions were asked in the survey. Questions like, what kind of fresh fruit do you eat? Did you eat any dried fruit yesterday? Don't count dried fruits in cereals, cakes. Apart from that, for vegetables, they asked how many tablespoons of vegetables did you eat yesterday? So, approximately after this whole survey was conducted, data was converted into portions of fruits, and like for example, 3 tablespoons of vegetables is equivalent to 1 portion. So, data was converted and provided to the users, that is us, from the UK Data Health Survey. So, the major contributions of my paper is that I found a strong negative association between intake of fruits and self-assessed health, then various measures of blood pressure like mean arterial pressure, high blood pressure, systolic and diastolic BP, and your total cholesterol. Apart from that, I have found a strong positive association between consumption of vegetables and good cholesterol. So, it is recommended in a way that if you want to control your blood pressure, you must consume more and more fruits. And as far as vegetables are concerned, they impact your good cholesterol. Apart from that, I went in for a falsification test. A falsification test is basically conducted to know whether the model that you have adopted and the conclusions that you are drawing are not spurious. So, if a falsification test is done to know, in a way it is tested by seeing an indicator, a health indicator which is not being impacted by your consumption of fruits and vegetables, and then we see whether there is significant result or not. If there is no significant result, that means your model is good and your results are non-spurious. So, what we did is, for falsification test, we took ear complaints and infectious diseases. Now, ear complaints like if you are deaf since birth, or you have some kind of imbalance, body imbalance, that is not being impacted by your consumption of fruits and vegetables, and we did find insignificant results. Apart from that, infectious diseases like HIV, AIDS, etc., we found similar insignificant results, indicating that our results are not non-spurious. Apart from that, we went, since there was a lot of heterogeneity in the data, like by gender, by age and by weight, we did the regression analysis. We found results which stated that as far as fruits are concerned, it impacts a male's health more than a female's health. So it is basically said a man should consume more fruits to impact his health, whereas as far as vegetables are concerned, they impact a women's health more. But this has been only seen as far as cholesterol is concerned, the various measures of cholesterol like total cholesterol, good cholesterol and your incidence of getting high cholesterol. Now after this we went in for a policy implication, and in the policy implication we tried to find two policy implications: what matters and exactly how much portion matters. So as far as how much portion matters, we have found that on an average 5 or more portions of fruits impact your overall health, that is your self-assessed health, your MAP, your incidence of high MAP and incidence of high BP. But if you want to have a good mental health, so you can optimize your mental health by consuming 3 or 4 portions of fruits as well. And similarly, as far as self-assessed health and total cholesterol is concerned, an individual must consume 4 to 5 portions to optimally have the impact of consumption of fruits. Apart from that, vegetables have had a very little impact on your health. It only impacts your incidence of getting high MAP and high BP, and it's seen that only it impacts when you consume 5 or more portions of fruits. So an optimum consumption of 5 or more portions of fruits and vegetables are recommended, but fruits have a more impact on your overall health, on various measures like self-assessed health, mental health, your various measures of blood pressure and various cholesterol levels. Another thing that we find is which type of fruit matters. It has been seen that all size fruits, they impact your self-assessed health, your systolic and diastolic blood pressure, your mean arterial pressure, your high BP and incidence of getting high MAP and high cholesterol. But we find that as far as frozen fruits or canned fruits are concerned, they help in regulating your incidence of getting high MAP or high BP, but it has a trade-off. That means there is something negative happening. It reduces the good cholesterol in your body. Apart from this, if you have an incidence of getting high cholesterol, it is recommended that you must consume fruit juices because it has a impact in reducing your probability of getting high cholesterol. And dried fruits, they impact your self-assessed health. As far as vegetables are concerned, very little impact has been seen. It has only been seen in case of portion of salads and its association with self-assessed health. Another thing that they have seen is vegetables in composite, they have an association with good cholesterol. So overall, my research basically says that there is an association between consumption of fruits and vegetables and various health indicators, and it is highly recommended that an individual, in order to be healthy, must consume 5 or more portions of fruits and 5 or more portions of vegetables per day, but fruits have a more impact on your overall health. Apart from that, all size fruits, they have a better impact on your overall health, your mental health, various measures of blood pressure and cholesterol. So, thank you.
Hello and welcome to this piece of literary snippet. We usually know William Shakespeare as the most revered figure in the history of English literature. But we often tend to forget that he has also been one of the most hated figures in literature. And here I am not talking only about those boys and girls who have to memorize long sections from Macbeth or King Lear or Julius Caesar before they can go and sit for their school or college exams. But I am also talking about people who are themselves quite famous authors. Tolstoy, for instance, considered the writings of Shakespeare to be, and I quote, crude, immoral, vulgar and senseless. George Bernard Shaw absolutely loathed Shakespeare, as he did Homer. But perhaps no other criticism about Shakespeare is more damaging than the one which says that Shakespeare is a marvelous storyteller, provided someone has told him the story earlier. Now, this piece of criticism is particularly damaging because it is true. None of Shakespeare's plays contain any original story whatsoever. They are all written using pre-existing materials, pre-existing stories. Now, does that diminish the stature of Shakespeare as a dramatist? Well, I'll leave that for you to decide. See you in the next episode of Literary Snippets.